Welcome to the Millionaire Hairstylist Podcast. I'm Jordan Drake, your host. I'll be joined in just a bit by celebrity hairstylist and our founder, Cash Lawless, on the podcast, where we talk mindset, models, and money with the most successful hairstylists, business leaders, entrepreneurs, and innovators in the hair, beauty industry, and beyond. Let's go.
When you think about the kind of money you want to make and the career you want to have, do you envision yourself standing behind the chair 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, doing the same thing over and over and over and over again until the day you die?
I really want everybody to see their price as the first ceiling to break through.
This is the part no one talks about, the money.
Our guest today has a thriving New York City salon, a product line in places like Anthropologie and Sephora, and before all that, he ran a successful chain of salons and hair schools in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. But if you ask Sam Brocato what he's most proud of, he'll tell you it's his real estate investing portfolio. And he believes, as do we here at the Millionaire Hairstylist, that every hairstylist should be considering real estate as something for part of their investing portfolio. We'll talk about why that is in this episode. We'll also talk about managing and hiring in your salons for success and why hairstylists are uniquely positioned for success because of what you do. And more importantly, who sits in your chair. It's a conversation I know you're going to value. I'll give it a quick technical caveat, which is if you're watching this on YouTube, and yes, we do put our episodes on YouTube. You can find a link to that in the description of the podcast feed. Did have some technical difficulties. It affects the video quality just a little bit, but the content of the conversation, the content of what Sam shares is fantastic. I know you'll appreciate it. Let's get right into it. Here's Sam Brocato on the Millionaire Hairstylist Podcast.
Yeah, very clearly. I've been watching just since I became aware of the hair career. You've been a huge figure, obviously, in that since I went to a Paul Mitchell school, and your name is everywhere. I met Win Claybaugh, and I met John Paul DeJoria, and Mary Brunetti, and all of these people. They just, your name just came up so much. So from the beginning of my career, I always was watching you.
There's Mary with Coley, our son, when we first moved here in our original apartment.
Oh my gosh,
there's
that's Mary.
Gianni and Trevor.
Oh my gosh. Oh, Trevor Sorby. Oh my gosh, yeah, that's incredible, Trevor. Wow. I used to go home from beauty school and watch Trevor Sorby DVDs and learn how to cut hair after doing my roller set, because I was trying to study, so hard in those years, and just learning all the players' names, and you were one of those. And so I didn't know you were.
I didn't. Did you work with Mary through Sally?
Yeah. So Mary taught me how to cut hair, like legitimately. So Mary was my haircutting coach. Yeah. So I went to Paul Mitchell. I got my cosmetology license. Then I went to Sassoon's on Davies Mews over in London, and then went to New York. And so I went to 3 schools. I went to Paul Mitchell, I went to Sassoon's on Davies Mews, and then I studied under Mary. And Mary was just such a phenomenal coach in hairdressing, as well as hair cutting. And so for me, she was just such a huge figure, and I'm still in touch with her. Today. It's amazing to see that. But I wanted to just say, after watching you and your career and all of the insane things you've done, I only recently found out you were in real estate. I know I moved to New York, and I was so starry-eyed. I saw your lawn and I saw your apartment, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is setting a vision for me. That's like, I want more. I want to do more. I want to go the distance. And so just watching what you were doing was so inspiring. But then I didn't know that you hadn't always just been that way, that you had started this way in school, and that you had built a multi-million-dollar business in Louisiana in a smaller market, and you had built schools, and you had built a real estate portfolio, and then you moved to New York and you 10x it there. I want to know, how the heck did you start in hair, and how did you start transitioning from standing behind the chair into business?
Well, the way I started in hair, and is when I was maybe in the 9th grade, 10th grade, somewhere in there, I was sent home for being incorrigible at school. I was acting up in class. I believe it was a math class, and I believe his name was Mr. Jamar. And I don't remember if I actually tried to take a swing at him or not, but it was something that was pretty bad. So I was sent home. And when I got home, my mom was said, your dad's going to be here soon and you're going to be in big trouble if he gets here and you're here suspended from school. Why don't you come with me to work? She worked an hour and a half every day, 5 days a week, as a bookkeeper for the federal funding at a beauty school. So I jumped in the car, went to the beauty school. There were 63 girls and me and one other guy, Mark, who was a lifelong friend till he passed. And I never left. I literally stayed there. I didn't finish high school. I finished beauty school. And I started doing hair very early on, barely 17 years old. And I mean, I was just rocking and rolling. If you look through my Instagram feed, there's about 30 photos down. There's a photo of me with my hair really long. I look like I'm 12 years old. And I'm probably 14 or 15. And that was me of the day. So there I was amongst all these girls that had this beautiful long curly hair.
Oh, wow.
They're doing this manicure thing. They're doing all this stuff to me. And I'm like, this is happening. So that's kind of that's the immediate beginning of my life in the hairdressing. And then pretty quickly I got on the floor, and it was really fortunate because I was pretty good. I was learning. We were just finishing the blood. Yeah, that's it. I got the wallet in my belt.
That's amazing. That's such an amazing photo. I hope I can get the right angle there.
I really don't know who took it, nor do I know about when it was. And I'd say I was probably 15. And the t-shirts have stuck with me. So,
and where was that, by the way, Sam?
That was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Okay, so you grew up in Louisiana.
I grew up in Louisiana, born in New Orleans. And my dad was an architect. My mom was a homemaker. And there were 7 kids. So I was the middle of 7. And I've lost 2 of them to what my brother and sister had passed. But so yeah, that's how I started. Got beauty school, got my first job. Well, actually, here's the funny thing. I have interviewed with 9 people and no one would give me a job because I had that long hair still. So finally, this is around the Vietnam War, and all the young guys were coming back from Vietnam with their heads shaved, and that was the time when you definitely wanted hair. So there were all these guys wearing wigs. Really and truly wearing little short hair wigs. They call them beetle wigs. So I did just the opposite. I took my hair, I pulled it in a ponytail, I put the wig on, and I went and interviewed at a couple of jobs. And this one guy, Jim, God bless him, he said to me, look, you don't have to wear that wig. He was real cool. He was an old guy. He was probably about 34. And that's how I got my first job. So I went to work, and I was a young, cool kid with the long hair, and the girls liked me. And, I got really, really busy. And I got really inspired to go out on the road. I met Paul Mitchell and became close friends with Paul. I then met Horst and got friendly with them. And the business exploded. We grew to $7.5 million in sales. We had 187 employees in Baton Rouge in the salon division and 365 kids in our beauty schools. And so, yeah, and it's just so what happened was, which is really important, I think, to part of what you're talking about here, is so I had this girlfriend, Valerie, and one night, after I'd been open on my own business in 1976, I'd been in business about 6 or 8 months, and I brought her over to my apartment at the Contempo Apartments. I remember it perfectly. And I brought her in the bedroom, and I said, look, and I lifted up the mattress, and it was just money, cash, money everywhere, stacked up under the. She goes, oh my God, how much is that? And I realized it's $3,000. Do the math. 1976, what was $3,000 today? It's a lot. So that I started accumulating cash, and all I did was slept, did hair, and made money and ate, and a little else. But so I within a day or two, Valerie's mother, Dee, shows up at the salon to get her haircut. I used to cut her hair in this cool little bowl cut. I remember her so well, and she was such a sweetheart. And she said, what were you doing with my daughter in your bedroom? But more importantly, what are you going to do with that money that's in there? So Valerie had gone and told her about it. Well, Dee was a real estate investor, a real estate agent. She took me somewhere and said, you can buy this house. These are the good old days. You can buy this house not far from the Louisiana State University for $19,800. You can live upstairs, and the person below you will rent from you, and it'll cover the bill. So that was deal one. Almost minutes after that happened, I had a customer named Camille Severe, 27-year-old. I was about 18. And she said to me, my boyfriend, who was really kind of like her elder boyfriend, gave her a duplex house. She said, if you'll buy this duplex house from me and no money down, I'm going to move and go to NYU. And she and her mother made up enough single little sheets of handwritten paper for $187 a month. And each one was dated for like 4 years. And she handed them to me and said, send me a check for $187 a month. The lawyer boyfriend went with me to the savings and loan, and the savings and loans officer was Mr. Lee. And Mr. Lee said, you can't do that. You can't transfer that title to his name. And the lawyer says, yes, I can. And it's already done. He owns the house. He owns the mortgage. And so I had a second mortgage to her, which is tiny, and the first mortgage to the savings and loan, which the person downstairs paid. And that's how I began to realize that, wait a minute, you can make all this money and you really don't have to work that hard. The numbers were simple. And so that was the beginning. And I started focusing all my time on being as great hairdresser as I could, running a great organization. But at the whole time, I had everything going towards building.
So that's been from day
Wow.
one. That's something you've built, is having real estate as part of your portfolio.
Yes, always has been. And there was a point where I realized pretty early on that on paper, I'd met that magical number on paper very early on. And I, somewhere in the back of my mind, said, never, ever will I retreat from that spot. No matter what, I'll never bet the house on it. It'll always be at this or above. And that was when I was 23.
Tell me more about the magical number.
$1 million in paper asset, the value of all the things. Because so I went from the two houses to, this is a great one. I bought the Fern Firm with an F, Gully apartments, which were in my neighborhood in Baton Rouge, which is where I used to ride my bicycle and hang out as a kid and play football, right there. So I buy these 24 units. It's still on the Google Earth. You can look it up. I don't know if they're still called Fern Gully, but I bought it, and quickly I found out that two of the apartments were really good customers of mine. Husbands were doctors, and the big hospital was nearby. They were going over there on lunchtime with the nurses. So they would leave the money in the freezers to pay the rent. And I had never to say a word to the wives. So that was one thing I learned early, that all the apartments didn't get used a lot. They were used very little. But the other thing I learned was this, and this was critical. There was a swimming pool. So it immediately comes up time to renew the insurance on the whole thing because of change of ownership. And they would charge me all this money. And I said, wait a minute, why is this so expensive? Swimming pool. I call the guy up. He comes over there with a big backhoe, and I filled it in, and I planted. I had crashed in the sides, filled in the swimming pool, drained it out, filled it in with dirt, and planted. And now to this day, it's still a garden out there in the foyer in the middle of this apartment complex. And then after that, I bought West Drive, which was two 8-plexes. And then I bought my one and only slumlording job. And I bought it because Miss Adams, who was my 4th grade teacher, lived in it. And it was right by Baton Rouge High School. And I felt sentimental about it. I kind of knew it wasn't a good idea. And I bought that one, but I didn't keep it long. So I just kept adding. I bought some houses. I bought one house was 37.8 on Acadian Thruway. I sold it for $97,000. And, I kept doing stuff like that. And then one day I realized I had 110 employees, and I had all this stuff going on. And I was like, I need to make a decision here and go for quality. So instead of having, I think I had 97 toilets or doors, keys. The nice way to say it is keys, right? The next way to say it is doors. And the really bad way to say it is toilet. So, so I get these calls. So I set up a little management company, and I hired one guy to handle all that. And he didn't do a good job. We had a business card, but he didn't do a good job. And I'm in my office one day with my one person to help me. And I said, this is just too much work. It's just not worth it. I love the hair business. I just love the energy, and the money was great. So I started selling things and consolidated to just a small number of either high quality properties and or some land. So as recently as last week or 2 weeks, I've been negotiating the 99-year lease on a piece of property. I want to make sure it's legacy for Gianni and Coley and family and all that. So there've been a lot of things in between, but that's kind of, yeah.
So in your 20s, I want to know what made you think at such a young age and in an era where information about real estate investing was not easily accessible, that you could go and own almost 100 doors in real estate and be cash flowing, as well as running a business, as well as running a salon. And this is in your 20s. I mean, it's incredible. What made you think, what about you was like, oh yeah, I can do that?
A couple of things happened. I did have a job. I did start really young, pushing more lawnmowers around the neighborhood, doing $2.50 yard cuts. So I threw papers a little bit, but I couldn't do that well because I was too small. I couldn't hold the bicycle up. I tried to sell at the Louisiana LSU Stadium and Tiger Stadium. I tried to sell Cokes because you get bigger profit if you sold Coca-Cola, but I couldn't hold the tray. And I lied about my age and I sold popcorn and I was 12. So I always kind of was trying to make money and support myself and not support myself, but have spending money and, hawking bottles, just the whole thing. We did it all. But then I had a job when I was 15 for a man, Mr. Prothro, and it's still in Baton Rouge called Jay's Barbecue. It's a tiny little place. It's a barbecue shop. It's the best barbecue shop. It was right down the street from my house. And Jay Prothro really taught me work ethic. He worked tirelessly. He was constantly I'll catch myself here in my salon walking along the back bar with a towel and wiping the towel off. And I remember watching Jay wiping the towel off on the counter, wiping the counter off, constantly working. So he gave me a bit of an insight subconsciously that I didn't really grasp or know that I did about a work ethic. And then not long afterwards, I was with my girlfriend, Karen, and we were over at a swimming pool at the Sherwood Forest Country Club. And laying on the heated deck, I'm reading Think and Grow Rich. And bam, bam, bam. I mean, everything just, it was like the dials fell in place. And I went, oh my God. And it just sounds like unbelievable. So those are a couple things I remember, the work ethic part, because remember, I was an incorrigible little shit. I was thrown out of school. I didn't finish school. I think a part of it is sort of an emotional sort of connection that has to do with not knowing you can't do it. I mean, I really believe those little stories about the bumblebee and the little wings, and I really started getting into, Zig Ziglar and all the motivational stuff. I mean, I truly believe that if you don't bathe for a week, you're going to stink. And if you don't motivate yourself every day, you're going to have stinky attitude. Just stuff like that. It's all garden variety stuff you pack together and you go out and do it. And by the way, one of the things you said, Cash, I don't do any coaching. I've never felt any inclination to coach. I have people that I talk to, and I guess it's called mentoring a little bit. And someone will ask me to take it a little further, and I'll say, "What do you want to know?" And it's, "Well, I don't know how to pay people." I'll send you my how to pay people, or but I don't do any kind of coaching, and I never really. I'm on the board of a few things. And but that's all. Yeah.
Sam, it's phenomenal. You mentioned Think and Grow Rich because at 19 or 20 years old in my life, that was the book that changed my life, my direction. I finally found out that I was the way I thought was the source of my problems, and I had a lot of problems. So it's phenomenal to hear that book also started your journey of just thinking differently and down a path. And I wound up starting in hairdressing, and I went into real estate, and it's just the mirror of following behind, a model that you set years before I even entered into the game. It's awesome to hear. It's awesome to hear. And Jordan, you had a question.
I'm curious, Who else was influential to you at that time when you were building the business and it was expanding? You mentioned meeting Paul Mitchell. Were there people that you were learning from in those formative years in real estate and in business?
Edwin Neal, I don't know if you guys know about the Neal Corp. You know them? They're the largest Aveda distributors in the world. They're based in Hammond, Louisiana. But Edwin, he was called Smokey at the time. But Edwin was my distributor. And he was watching what I was doing. And he wasn't invested in real estate or any of those things at that point. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I had Louisiana State University marketing department do a research for me, and 11 of their master's degree students have come in and spent 3 days in my salon and interviewed customers and customers and customers. And now they're going to come back and give me a complete demographic research study because I want to have 5 locations. And they're going to tell me where they should be. And I'm going to buy each of the places where they're going to be. And I'm going to have a central hub here." And I did all that. I did it all by the book, the way they showed me. I built it out. And so this guy, Edwin, influenced me one day by doing this. He says, "You have to meet Jameson Shaw." And Jameson Shaw was Don Jameson Shaw of Atlanta, Georgia, and it's Candy Shaw, father. So I went to Atlanta because I was building a salon and I wanted to see how he built it. And I wanted to meet him. He was super successful, 25 years older than me. And he's sitting there and he says to me, "You know what?" He got that Georgia accent. "You know what? You need to belong to Intercartier." And I said, "Okay, whatever the hell that is, I'm joining." And I've had assorted people in the financial and banking world that were helpful. I'll tell you a really quick story. I know I'm spending, I don't know how long time we have. You can edit whatever you need. But this is a really interesting story, and I've got to bring the book here. In 1987 or whatever, when the interest rates were at 18%, you can go and Google it. They were really, really high. So I bought a building, which I still own, at the corner of South Sherwood Forest Boulevard, and I forget the side street now. And I built a 7,500 square foot. My dad and I built a building on this plot. And I'm starting it up and I'm using my own cash, and I decided, well, I'm going to put a mortgage on it. So I go looking for like 800 grand. I go to the bank, and I hadn't been following it close and close. And they said, "We get special money for you. It's only 12.75% interest, and we can guarantee it for 2 years." I was like, I'm not the smartest guy in town, but I know that sucks. And the real interest rate, really and truly, the retail rate was 18%. So I was literally cutting the Secretary of State's hair. His name is Jim Brown. And if you Google Jim, you'll see that he even ended up in prison for a while. But he was the Secretary of State. And I'm cutting his hair only because his wife made me. And he said to me, I said, "Jim, can you answer a question? How the hell is a building right across the street from the one I'm building, 6 stories of glass and metal and all, how are they paying for that?" And I'd already gone and talked to this guy that was building it, and he couldn't help me. So I don't know why he didn't or what. So Jim says, "I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to do you a favor." He said, "You get your dad," and I'm probably 26 years old, 25. He said, "You get Frank, my dad," he knew he was an architect. Come meet with me." We go to his office, meet with him. And he says, "I sit on an industrial revenue board. I'm the chairman of the industrial revenue board. We do the revenue bonds for the state." He says, "I'm going to put you up for an opportunity to earn a revenue bond." And so I ended up going before the board. He was a splitting vote. I got the votes I needed, and I got a loan for $900,000, 3%. No prepayment in the years when it was the worst. So that story to me is so critical to an understanding of not giving up and knowing not just where to drill, but knowing that you got to drill and you got to keep drilling.
There's a parallel there that I see as well to something that Cash has talked a lot about, Sam, which is the ability that hairstylists have to connect with people that are in unique positions of authority or power or insight or culture, and you build this relationship with them. I know that's been a huge benefit to Cash. Is that something else you've seen? Is that the people who sit in your chair have been a big part of your success?
Yeah, the number one name is Laura Fields, and she and I are super close still on the, I'm gonna turn my phone, bring. She and I are still very close. She's probably 78 years old now. And she was a realtor and did a couple of deals with us, helping us sell our home before we moved to New York, and helped me find a place there in New York at first. But one day I told Laura, I showed her my big plan. I did her hair and I walked her next door to my corporate offices, and I showed her I had a map and I had all the things placed on it where we were going to build and open, and right in the middle was the main place. And I said, Laura, I need that middle piece. And it was on what's called Jefferson Highway, which is like a moneyed area of town. Now, right next to where I was wanted to buy was called the Baton Rouge Country Club. If you can look it up, it's still there. And my dad being an Italian, we weren't allowed to go to the country club. If you were Hispanic, Black, Italian, Jew, blah, 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 you didn't go to the country club. So Laura says, I know just the perfect piece of property for you, Sam. It's owned by the Keene family. The Keenes were a big dry cleaner family, 4 daughters and 1 brother, John. And Laura was able to convince the girls to override John to sell me the 5 acres. That is, here's 5 acres. There's another piece here, and there is a swimming pool and the golf course of the country club. And I've always joked and said I was going to name the building, WAP Heaven or something like that, or name it just after my dad, because had it not been for Laura, I own a building today. We own it right now. That's part of what we're negotiating on. And I've never even developed the back 2 1/4. It's one of the most valuable pieces of property around there. And people all the time, like, what are you going to do with it? After Katrina, I was offered $1 million cash for that little piece of property because everyone had to leave New Orleans and set up shop. And so they were all kinds of crazy stuff. So yes, I've had many people that have helped me, guided me. That's one of the reasons I still do hair here. It's a way to get to know the community, meet people, let people get to know you, that you're worth trusting. I have a customer in New York. I have a couple $100,000 line of credit on my salon. It's a small salon. We don't carry any debt, really. We'll have 50 of us here. That's not that small. And one day, about 2 years ago, she asked me a question. I didn't know what she did for a living. She asked me a question, and she said, who do you bank with? And I said, well, I've been banking with Chase forever, but those assholes, when I left Louisiana after banking with them for 20 something years, putting 130 million through their systems, I come here and you think I'm dead. They wouldn't give me any. I tried to connect my Baton Rouge bank with the New York bankers. They couldn't talk. The banker in Baton Rouge wanted to talk, but they wouldn't talk. It was terrible. So she said, what are you trying to do? I said, I'm thinking about buying a building around the corner. I'm trying to buy the 2nd floor. I said, I want an evergreen line of credit. I want to get away from my annual renewal one, and I want an evergreen. And they're giving me some pushback. I'm like, I had more money in the bank than I wanted, and it wasn't that much. That was on a Friday afternoon. I cut her hair. I get a call, 1 o'clock on Monday. A banker calls me and says, hey, Mr. Brocato, this is so-and-so from Chase Bank on 14th and 5th Avenue. And he wants you to know we went ahead and put your evergreen loan in place. And we just went ahead and doubled what you requested. It's all set up. Can you just walk by and sign off the papers? I'd already been rejected. She called him up. She's somebody. And since that happened, I never asked her. I know. I just know she's somewhere floating in the heavens in the Chase world.
Wow, that's incredible. So someone sat down in your chair, and then I know there's times where this has happened to me, as I've worked with, CEOs and CMOs and CFOs and people in, crazy high positions in businesses, as well as high performers in the arts and celebrities and things like that. And each one of these people, I in the beginning of my career, I wasn't pursuing that for that, but it was so crazy. The opportunity that we hairstylists have, I noticed.
You did that way more and better than I did it in a way, because I never had the patience to sit around and wait on a celebrity. They come in the salon and that's fine. I just never, if I wasn't the center of attention, man, I was like, I don't want to do this. So if I'm doing a hair show, I think the way you've leveraged it all is just phenomenal, Cash. It's beautiful to watch. I've enjoyed it. It's motivating, inspirational to watch.
I know that you did move your empire, for lack of a better word, from Louisiana, and you moved to New York. So I want to know 2 things. One is, why And then the second would be right around that time is when Cash also came to New York. Wasn't that like 2008, 2009, 2010 period? So I'm curious, when did you first meet Cash? And can you tell us a story about that? So two questions in one.
One bit of history, and I have the files to prove it. Arnie Miller approached me and asked and offered me 2% of Matrix if I would move to Solon and work there as Luis Alvarez was leaving and Dwight Miller and all, to move to Solon and be one of the top people in Matrix. And I had just come out of a bad business relationship with someone, and the energies felt kind of the same. And I said no. Well, 2% of Matrix, according to Dave Cook, who was the CFO at Matrix, and when they sold to Alberta Culver, whoever, he and I stayed best friends on the phone, and his piece of 2% was worth $125 million. So to create a little background, how some of the big deals, things you miss in life, that really did happen. So here's why I moved to New York. So when Edwin Neal, my old mentor, called me up and had just been told by Aveda that he the old alarm behind your back, we'll give you $9 million, but you got to give us all your stores, all your lifetime stores, what are they called? Lifestyle stores, Aveda. So he called me, Edward called me and said, Sam, I want to hedge my bets. I want to make an investment. He says, can I buy your schools? And I said, well, I want to sell my schools. They're doing well. I'm making money, and I own the buildings and blah, 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 blah. So no. And he called me back maybe 3 weeks later, and he says, well, what if we just buy the whole thing? And so I went home, and my wife Holly's in the kitchen. I go and I said, Holly, Edwin wants to buy the business. We're literally at our 25th anniversary. I said, I just don't know. And she said, you remember what you did when you didn't say yes to Arnie at Matrix? And I went, maybe you're right. Maybe it's time. Maybe we need to just, if it ain't broke, break it. That's a really good book, by the way, to read. If it ain't broke, break it. So we decided to just do it. And we cut a deal. We sold the assets of the business, kept the real estate, and cut these long-term leases, which are still in act today, and moved to New York, sight unseen. I walked around the city for a couple of years, played around with the Brocato brand, but mostly going to museums and stuff, and realized, man, I'm too young to die. I'm not going to stop working. And then we ended up, when we met you, Cash, I believe right around the time, I think it was 2008, 9, somewhere in there. Would that have been it even? So
yeah, 2008, 2009.
So we decided to take over the salon in Soho, which was failing. And not only that it was failing, it was really in bad shape. The number one producer had resigned the week before we signed the deal, and they didn't tell us. So we got a little quickie pulled on us. But hey, you know what? We did one thing when we got here. And that one thing was we stayed focused to the business practices we had developed and used to build the organization in Louisiana. And to this day, I have people call and say, God, I wish you were still here. Not because I wanted to work for you, because I wanted to have to compete against you, because you raised the bar so much in the way you practice. So it's 13 years later, and that's how we kind of ended up here. And if we wouldn't have been here, back here, hand making all these products and doing stuff with this, putting it out on the shelf, some of the top people in the cosmetic world would have never come in here to get their hair done and asked me to get in business with them.
It's incredible to watch you, but what was the difference? You decided, well, I'm going to be successful in this smaller market. I'm going to be successful in this bigger market. Did you ever consider, what was the market you were in ever a limiting factor or a consideration for you that you were like, oh, I should probably move to New York so I can do more? I mean, because it seemed like you've done so much in Louisiana already.
No, I never thought that much of the limiting factor of it. I didn't want to come to New York and do salons. The salon thing sort of fell in our lap because someone called me and asked for advice on running beauty schools, and they were going to open a beauty school. And I just happened to mention, well, you got 2 small kids, you live in New Jersey. How are you going to open a beauty school in New Jersey and run a salon in one of the most competitive areas of the country? And how are you going to do that? And they said, well, you want to buy it? I said, not really. I thought about it. That's how I kind of ended up in the salon. Here, I never really wanted to, but what I understood immediately was 2 things. Number one, that I was buying a lease that was 70% below market value, and it had 10 years on it. And I knew that worst case scenario, I could buy the salon, shut it down, and sell the lease and make a profit. I knew that the minute I saw the deal. So it was a no-brainer on the real estate.
You make your money on the buy, right? You make your money on the buy.
We bought an apartment recently, 37% below appraisal, and as of today, it's up 51% because things are on fire here again. It's crazy, like overnight. And then the second thing was I took over. Oh, and the second thing was I understood that if I had the support and help of my business partner in Brocato, this could be a flagship for the Brocato brand. But he and I could never come to terms with it. He didn't want to support it in any way other than, products. And so I ended up one day walking in and saying, you know what, you got the money and the lawyers, you take the kids in the house, I'm going to start over. And I walked out of the Minneapolis office and came home to New York, gave up a pretty substantial income that I was taking out of the business, like substantial, within a month. And then started sitting on the sidelines to wait out the non-compete. And as I did, I started working on Together Beauty with Holly and my team here. And we started developing products with the idea of just having products that we love, we made, they were clean, they were natural. Finally, the ingredients were coming that you could do it, make really good stuff. And then we decided that this one guy that kept coming in and asking, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? And one day we made a deal. And so it turned out that the reason to be in here turned out to be really more than anything, other than the wonderful people we work with and we've met, is that it's the starting place for our brand.
What did you do differently on the second time around with product? Were there major differences of how you approached, obviously the product side, you say it's more natural, but a lot of people, I think we talk about the Millionaire Hairstylist, that hairstylists have such an opportunity to create their own products and sell their own products as a passive or as a revenue stream. What were some of the lessons learned that you applied in Together Beauty?
Well, just keep in mind, though, that 94% of every professional product in the last 24 months has not been sold by a professional salon. So going the salon route, in my opinion, I wasn't going to do it again. I wasn't going to go out and knock on doors and beg hairdressers to sell my product and say, well, come do 3 cutting classes first, we'll see. So the white space for us was, well, we were customer focused. I intentionally, and I can say, I don't think 2 people that are hairdressers, and I've had 5,000 ask me, I don't think 2 have received a free sample of my products. And that's as typical as breathing in our industry. I just saw a post of a guy, he went and visited a salon and he gave them 3 products free. I don't give anything away. No sampling to a non-customer, because for me, the salon wasn't where I was going. The customer was. And it wasn't retail. It just wasn't salon for sure. It was going to be only focused on our consumer. So the only people we talked to were the consumers and of course the people who work here. The thing that I saw, we were consumer facing. And the consumers were giving us the feedback. We love how it smells, whether it works and all that. And then we started building the brand little by little. And eventually the retail thing popped up. And when it did, it was before Sephora was doing Clean at Sephora. So when they met us, it was literally 2 weeks before they were working on launching it. They met us and they went, wow, because we were already 3 steps ahead of them in doing it. And they said, 15 minutes with them. And then that's how we started doing that. And then we got in Anthropologie, and we just opened in Adore in Australia, literally last week. If you go to adore.com.australia, you'll see a really nice write-up about Together Beauty. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. That's so interesting because you are talking about, I imagine a lot of that is online sales, and it's also sales through Amazon. Do you do FBA, or is it directly through your own fulfillment?
We're direct. We're direct. If you go to Together Beauty or Brocato Salon, our focus is really those 2, Brocato Salon and Together Beauty. The other stuff is really about market awareness. If I sell a bottle of stuff here or on Together Beauty, we make 4.5 times more than we make through Sephora. So.
It appears that you really know your numbers. You remember interest rates from 18 to 12% to 3%. You knew the exact value of the sale of your property. You knew your profits. As you've told these stories, it seems like the reputation of the hairdressers that they don't know anything about numbers, or they can't know anything about numbers because they're artists. And a lot of hairdressers think that just because they're artists, they have to be bad with numbers. But it seems like you have a keen awareness of numbers. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you know your numbers so well, and they seem important to you? And I'd love to know, are they?
Yeah, they're super important. I use the flash reports versions of the same thing I've used all my career to give me a daily rundown of what's going on in each of the buckets of our lives where our income comes from. And to me, what happened early on was I luckily went to a Redken 1-week course on salon management in California. And I was there with Neil Dukoff. I don't know if you guys know who Neil is, but he's the founder of Strategies magazine and teaching people to pay salaries. He's a wonderful guy. He sent me a photo recently of us at that thing in, I don't know, maybe it's 87 or 85. But anyway, at that, I met a guy named Sam, and he taught me how to read a balance sheet. I kind of had an idea pretty good on P&L, but the balance sheet always sort of, was strange to me. And so I became a student of the numbers. And what I learned was that my brain is a lot like computers. They say you have to tell a computer code it 3, 4, 5 times before it actually really takes. I was the same way. So I would go to my Mark Derwam, my CPA, and he was a young guy. He was probably maybe 7 years older than me. And I'd make him meet me at 6:30 in the morning. And I'd go out and run 5 miles, and then I'd go run to his place all sweaty. And I'd go to his office, and we would have a 45-minute class. And so he just started saying, he'd say, look how expensive all the products are that we have. What's going on? He said, I tell you what, get your mom to go in the morning and stand there when everybody's coming in with a chart, counting and writing numbers down, and then do it at the end of the day. And in 2 days, all the thefts slowed down to nothing because we were losing so much customers and employees were stealing the blind. So all those numbers that have to do with drilling down into the cost. So yeah, I think in the terms of percentages. To me, whether it's 2% of 200 million or 2% of 2 million, is still 2%.
We love that.
So numbers are, they're the secret that unlocks the safe. If you never have 101 pennies in a dollar, and only a fool has 80, and that fool usually is skimming the 20, right? So you always have 100%. There's a rule book that's called Play by These Rules. It's called the U.S. government, the federal, blah, blah, blah. You play by those rules, you got a damn good chance of winning, because all you have to do is model someone who did it before you. I mean, they're out there everywhere. I study numbers. Yeah, I read a book. The other day. I'm raking my brain to remember the name of it. It was, I remember one specific thing. He said, if you want to live like nobody else, you have to first live like nobody else, which you got to live in a little bitty room and not spend any of your money. You have to save up enough money to do the first deal, and to get your fingers in there. And, so I'm always studying. I did a little course the other day on lease swapping, and going in and taking over someone's house where you own you pay the lease for them because they want to get out, and they want to get out in a hurry, and you have a right to buy at the current market value, and it's a 10-year option to buy it, and you take the lease over and you re-rent it, and now you're at 30, 40, 50% profit on the return on money. You didn't put any money in. You just guaranteed the note and stood behind and made sure the renter was there. You said, I'll fix the air conditioner. Everything's on me. I have 10-year option to buy. That's cool. I mean,
that's cool. That excites. I mean, I love that strategy. That excites. I'm a real estate investor. I've been investing in real estate for the last 7 years. I've done about 800 real estate transactions. And
have you been able to keep doing hair?
Actually, now I have retired from doing hair, and I'm moving into building this business with teaching hairstylists how to become 7-figure hairstylists, or at least at the very least, just thinking what's next for you, what's bigger for you, and there are great ways to get there. You're going to say something?
I was going to say that, I think the thing that you need to boil it down. When I was writing my book, which I happen to have a copy of, but I wrote this book 35 years ago, beautiful business, and sold 135,000 copies of it, and printed it for $1.92 and sold it for $28.95, door to door on the show circuits, with Holly holding the shoebox collecting the cash and me signing the books. But one thing I'll tell you is that book was written for about a 5th grade reader, maybe even a 7th grade reader. So we have to be respectful of the learning level of most of the people like us that go into, like me, that go into the business, ADD, not a lot of formal education. Now, that doesn't mean they have to stay behind, but that means that's where they're starting. So I think it's really important in sharing this information to have a grasp on who these people are that you're speaking to, so that you can make sure they embody it and they realize that being rich isn't having a lot of stuff. Being truly wealthy is being able to not work if you don't want to. I was listening to my friend Van yesterday, my Van Counsel, and at the end of it, someone said, "Hey, can I ask you a couple more questions later?" He said, "Yeah, man." He said, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm never retiring." And Van could retire. He and I are the same age, but he's like, what are you going to do? You find something you love. You take enough time off to go on the water skiing and all the boating and bicycle riding stuff he loves to do. For me, I have my things, but I think it's important that the kids that you're talking to realize that once you have that money, I just help set up a permanent lifelong fund for ICA and Coiffure that will perpetually pay for the organization. Me and Scott Buchanan, we spent about 4 months on it. It's all set up now. The money is almost all in there, enough to get it. And so once they understand that they can live on $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year, they'd like to have $1 million, and that it only takes about $400,000 to generate that kind of income, then they're working on getting that pot of gold filled up before they start spending it. I think that's a big piece of it.
We talked recently on Clubhouse about the business hierarchy of needs. And we had a great conversation because we really landed on the 3rd level of the hierarchy. It goes cash flow, profit, and then organization, which is the people and the systems and how you build these things out. And what I'd love to know from you is you've built multiple successful businesses in multiple markets that have hundreds of employees. Tell us about your thought process for teams and people and hiring, because if you were bad at that, then everything would have fallen apart. But what was it about what you were doing on the salon side, whether it's a CPA, business part, like all the people in your world? How do you pick them? How do you make sure you're working with the right people?
I have a good advantage now, and that is I'm definitely old enough to be everybody's father, and in a lot of cases, their grandfathers. So when I'm putting my arm around Diana earlier because her 93-year-old mom is dying, I'm basically putting my arm around someone that's, 38 years old. So there's a certain level of trust and respect. If you go on my Facebook page, about 5 entries ago, there's a 5-minute video of us recruiting. And it's our people talking about what it means to them to work here. And from that, you'll hear the conviction in their voice. And I decided a long time ago that I wasn't going to try to be like Sally here in New York City. Right from the beginning, I wasn't going to try to be like Rodney Cutler, is a friend up the street and doing the fashion show. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do real people's hair. I wanted to meet the community. I wanted to have high tickets coming in. And to choose those people, I had to make sure that they all understood. It was like, I didn't want everyone that come in to try to be a star. I'd rather have someone doing 30% less and be super dependable and not go out and do, Yoko Ono's haircut or whatever it may be. Some good friends of mine. It's just kind of the model was there around it to have really passionate people that were bought into a culture that the culture itself is based on compassion. One of the things I learned at FIT in my branding courses, I spent 50 hours there, and I learned one most important thing, and that was the archetype of a brand. And that's central to the archetype of a human being, but a brand, and ours is compassion, and with a little bit of rebelliousness in our DNA. So we pick people. It's a little bit. I mean, who knows? We don't do a lot of elaborate testing, but we do get input from different people, and we have a really interesting mix of people here. And I think it comes from the top down. They watch my wife Holly and I. We work very hard, way harder than we need to work, but we do it. That's what we do. We're just workaholics, and they see it. They see me pick up a piece of paper or trash. They see me wipe up the floor. They see me stop last night as I'm tired. I'm getting ready to walk out the door, and I realize this lovely front desk person is getting ready to have to clean the shit and where the garbage was, and the bag had leaked and all. And I took off my backpack and I put it aside, and I got in there with her, and she and I cleaned it up and got it all smelling fresh again. And I said, all right, I'm done. And I left. And I think that part of it's that. Now I'll just say it's harder to scale that. But I learned, at Lockworks, my first salon, the bulk of my investments happened in the first 40% of my growth. Because the second 60%, where I went from 55 or 60, knocking it crazy, massive cash flow to 70, 80, 100, 120, 130, and 40 people, I spent 60% of my time managing that monster and not having the cash flow and the tight culture I had when it was smaller. So my opinion is, whether you're talking about a suite or a booth rental or whatever, get in the real estate business. Do whatever it takes to own your space. I don't care if it's just a little bitty, 700 square foot space.
The only other thing I'd love to know about is, I think a lot of hairstylists, as they get into real estate or as they want to scale their business, they need a CPA, they need a lawyer. How did you navigate that even earlier in your career when you were adding these sort of support people that weren't in the hair game, but were more on the business side, and just go with your gut? Was it referral? What was your tactic for navigating that and finding good people to be on your bench?
I don't remember who told me, but it was one of the best pieces of advice I ever got. And I just recalled it when you said that. They said, what you do is you have this thing called an organization chart. And I have it in my book, actually. And so they said, what you do is you draw out the organization chart and write in every job that has to be done. And then write the name of the person doing it. And lo and behold, it was me or Wilma, my mom. And then my girlfriend did some of it and all. And then she called me back 20 years later and told me she was stealing from me. It was part of her recovery program. She had stolen $30,000 from me. Like, oh, really? Well, I just write a check. But so what I did, I filled in the boxes, and I filled in lawyers, bank, and I learned I needed to have a name on the banker. It couldn't just be a bank; it needed to be a real person. I could pick up, and go, hey, do this, do that, and watch for this, and so that's kind of how I did it. And I asked around. I never had typically anyone that was that kind of person that was my customer. They could be a customer of the salon, because you got to keep it at arm's length. So that's how I built mine. And to this day, I tried to get a CPA in New York when we first got here and opened this business. And I swear, the guy said to me, I don't care what you tell me. You can do whatever you want, but keep it to yourself. Don't tell me. I'll do your books. In other words, he told me if I want to cheat, I could. I mean, it scared me so bad. I called up Chip, who had been my CPA for 25, 30 years. I said, Chip, I'm coming home. I'm staying. So I've continued to be a Louisiana-based company in New York City and filed tax return. It cost me 3.75% totally a year more to do it that way. But I've done it because I know that saying, the devil you know is the one better than the one you don't know. My dad told me that all the time.
That's right.
It is right. Yeah. Anyway.
I do a similar thing. I base all my businesses out of Texas now. I've got one business left in California, and we're leaving that state. And it really is, it's a strategy. I don't have to be physically in New York to be able to run business in Texas, or I don't have to physically be in Texas to have my business running out of Texas. And I think it's a limiting viewpoint for a lot of business owners to think that everything's got to be done right where you are. And you can have nowadays you can have a global network. You can have things based in one place, and you can have your network in a place where and you trust people. And so leveraging that network, if you came from Louisiana and you move to New York, you can still do business with your Louisiana network. I think that's a really powerful lesson to not, if let's say you want to move to New York and start working with celebrities, but you also want to, keep your salon running in Louisiana, you can do that. And it looks like you have been able to do those amazing things through your network and the people and just you it looks like you lift people up. Just from kind of listening to you, how could you not getting hundreds of people to come and work for you, give the testimonials online of what it's like to work for you so passionately and so honestly, if you weren't a great leader? And I'd love for you to just speak on leadership for a moment. And I know that in this business, we can't do everything, right? Like in our business, like you're not doing everything. You have a CPA and you probably have a salon manager. And what would your advice be to a young person trying to scale a business from a one-person business to a two-person business and then a three-person business?
Well, I think that, my own story is when I called up, tried to hire a first person, I had to be perfectly clear with them that I wasn't exactly sure where I was going or what I was doing, because at that point I didn't know. I just knew that I wanted to build something that was exciting and brought joy, and that I wanted them to be a part of that. I actually offered Jerry, my first employee, half of the business for nothing. And his dad and mom said, no, don't do that. He's still a friend of mine now. And I'm glad I didn't take it. But so I think that the number one thing from the start is to be the one that is willing to work the hardest to show everybody how it's done. That's the first part of modeling what you want to figure out, then how to scale. And then at some point, and I didn't really finish a point a few minutes ago, but if you have one super salon that's throwing off, in my world, throwing off, say, 3 to 6 million, there's enough cash flow in there to invest elsewhere to make way more money than you need to trying to run a lot of hair salons. So, I could pick up 10 salons here in New York City today. I could get in, for little or nothing, and maybe add 100 employees or something, but it's just not smart business. It's just not it's not the kind of business that you can scale and necessarily, unless you're going to do super cuts or you're going to do that kind of thing. So I think building teams and building good people and good leadership has to be staying true to what you personally value, do the things you do. And I'm pretty boring, basically. I'm pretty repetitive. My best buddy and mentor, Paul Mitchell, said haircutting is just a series of repetitious movements. You just have to be patient and do them repetitively. And then you might get a little spin going, a little excitement around it. But essentially, it's pull it down and cut it off, and you pull it down and cut it off. And so I think going through your life, it's the same thing. And I know for me, as the years go by, I have narrowed the window of things that I want to spend my time on. I particularly want to share information, obviously, about things I've done, because sometimes I do look back and go, wow, that's pretty fucking remarkable. You look at all the pieces of it. Considering the really ADD and not even finishing in high school. No formal education. But I think it's persistent mirroring it to people. You just keep showing up. Take the hit, get up. Take the hit, get up. Never burn up all the fuel, because then you can't fight another day. You can't go back at it. So you always make sure you don't push the whole of everything. And that's it with people. Don't ever put all of everything into one person, because they're not going to be there forever. That's okay. They need to do the great job while they are there, and explain to them, if you leave this place really in the best way, if you spend 3 years here, however long, and you're just absolutely a premier person, you're going to go on to be a premier person somewhere else. And maybe you'll be your own boss if that's what you want. But you have to be that person. You never can have someone be it for you.
I thought I was a fan before, and I always idolized your life and your accomplishments, and more your character. The way you treated people and the way you treated your wife and the way you talked to your kids and the way that you had built your businesses. And all of that was just very fascinating to me, watching you, do everything you've done, just from the little I have seen from social media, and just hearing from other people your reputation. It's been a phenomenal thing to watch. And just to hear that you are not TikTok, Clubhouse is like an 8-month-old platform. You're on it, you're using it. Crypto is a very, a lot of people are like, I don't know, I'm going to wait. And you're just like diving in and just seeing opportunity and using that intuition. It's phenomenal to watch that.
Well, I tried to get onto Coinbase, started about a month and a half ago. And every time I started setting my account, it blocked me off and said, do it manually. And I didn't. And now I'm glad until now. So I think I would go ahead and do something with somebody else, but I need to get it done. So, because I think it's the moment. I don't think it's going to go to 27 or anything like that. I don't think, but
I don't either. I'm with you.
Yeah. So
I'm with you.
I will tell you that, like anything in life, there truly are people that everybody's born differently. We all have a different personality and people are so different. And I'm really blessed, but I really love people and I really love being alive and living. And, I'm not afraid of not being alive, but the real point is that you really have to care about being alive. You just have to really search it out and be curious and be wondering about it, looking around and researching. And it just makes it so much more enriching. It just makes the day better. So that's what I've always done. And as time goes by and you lose people, I lost 2 of my siblings in 8 days apart. Those things really, 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 they form your care. And then what we went through with COVID, I mean, wow, what an experience. And that gave us a chance here to further define we pivoted to a maternal role, paternal-maternal role here. We pivoted to a true family type of organization during COVID. And we basically said, these 50 people are our children. They have to be safe at home. They have to have food. They have to have money. And we're going to treat them like our children until we get out on the other side. And that is exactly what we did. And as we've coming out of it, we began to, draw the boundaries a little further out and redefine it. And it's been a really interesting sociology of it all to watch how it unfolds. Humanity.